So Amber Heard finally dropped her full interview with Savannah Guthrie. It aired on Dateline's primetime hour on Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. East Coast time. And this video, we are going to be reacting to it. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome to Legalbytes. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. So I was fully anticipating doing a live stream reacting to this interview because I figured this was going to be an extended 1 hour long interview that would be ripe for commentary. Now, of course, this is definitely going to be right for commentary. However, the nature of this particular piece gave me a little bit of pause for doing a full live stream out of it. And I wanted to instead take certain portions from this Dateline special and react to those. The reason for that is there's several reasons. One of them is the fact that because it's sort of interspersed or interwoven with a lot of narration by Savannah Guthrie, she's sort of giving background about the case, about the trial, about the whole lawsuit, and a lot of the background for Amber Heard and for Johnny Depp. I wanted to cut a lot of that out, partly because a lot of the viewers of this channel are already very familiar with a lot of this background information. Now, on a bit more of a realistic level for the channel, I also wanted to cut these portions out because I was a little bit more concerned about copyright issues, and I want to make sure that we have a very good fair use argument for commentary. So, what I wanted to do was to cut out the portions that are about narration by Savannah Guthrie and just react to the portions of this special that are the actual sit down interview with Amber Heard and Savannah Guthrie together. And before we get into it, you probably also noticed that I'm in a completely different environment yet again. It's because I'm in a cabin in the woods, essentially. It's a very nice cabin, though, I have to say. It's a very, very nice place. But I'm with a bunch of girlfriends for the weekend. And so I decided to take a little bit of time away from my friends to record this video. And they are being super patient and awesome and wonderful. And so if you hear other noises going on outside of this room, that would be why. Anyway, let's get into it. So I've already skipped certain portions of this interview, like the first 5 or 6 minutes of it, because there's a lot of background that goes into it. And so there's also certain portions that we've already heard from the previous pieces of this interview that have dropped as well. So I've already skipped about, like I said, about 5 or 6 minutes. And so now even from this portion, I'm going to skip even a little bit further so that we get right to her interview portion as well.
You've said many times you just wanted to go on with your life. When you wrote the op-ed, it raised all of this again. Why did you do that if you wanted to just go on and
Good
put
question.
this past you?
Because the op-ed wasn't about my relationship with Johnny.
But it alluded to him.
Of course.
It was unmistakable.
It is unmistakable.
You know, what the op-ed was about was, me loaning my voice to a bigger cultural conversation that we were having at the time. It was about reforms, legislative reforms, renewing the Violence Against Women Act.
Did you worry? Gosh, I'd love to be a person weighing in on these cultural issues, but that's going to stir this all up again.
You know, that's a great question, and one that I wish was considered more seriously, because it's important.
When you wrote this op-ed,
I don't understand what she means by that.
Legions
Hang
of
on.
powerful men.
Amber, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by I wish was considered? Because right here, right now, you are talking about an op-ed that you wrote. Are you talking about other people considering certain things, or are you talking about yourself considering certain things? That is that passive language is a little bit interesting here. Also, again, I've said this in previous reaction videos to these interview pieces that have dropped previously, that you admitted on the stand, Amber. You admitted on the stand that it was about Johnny Depp. This was during your rebuttal testimony. You can't take that back. That was in a court of law. You said that to the jury. You said it directly to the jury. So trying to say that this was not about him. Okay, sure. Maybe portions of your op-ed were also about, maybe even most of your op-ed was about other issues that were more societal issues. The fact of the matter is you made statements in there that a jury has now determined are defamatory. So to say that it wasn't about him, that it was only about other stuff, you referenced your marriage from 2 years ago. You referenced a relationship that from 2 years ago that was unmistakable. And this is what the jury ended up finding as well.
Men being canceled, losing their jobs. Did you want that to happen to Johnny Depp?
Of course not. It wasn't about him.
Saying that it wasn't about him. Okay. Okay, Amber. But it actually was. And you admitted to it once again. Okay. Let's move on. We'll get to the next portion where she talks because now we're going to get into some narration at this point. So we'll skip ahead a little bit.
I don't have to remind you that you've been found liable for defamation against Johnny Depp.
You have been found
Having
liable.
been found liable, are you nervous as we are here today about what you can say now?
Of course. I took for granted what I assumed was my right to speak. Not just about
Lies.
what I lived through, but what I knew.
Lies. More
Do you
lies.
feel like you could be sued again by him for defamation?
Lies. Yeah.
I'm terrified, which is what I guess a defamation lawsuit is meant to do. It's meant to take your voice.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. We talked about this in the last segment as well. It is not intended to take someone's voice. It is intended to rectify the reputational harm from you lying about another person. That's what a defamation case is for. I hope that there is no one out there that is actually listening to what she's saying and saying, "Oh, this is probably what a defamation case is all about," because it's not. A defamation case is about rectifying the lies that someone has told about another individual and that has harmed their reputation. Stop it. Okay, let's continue on. Okay, so now for context before this next segment, they've talked about the courtroom crowds, I guess you could say, the crowds that have been around the courthouse and whatnot. So let's hear what Amber has to say about that.
What did you see out the window of that car?
Every single day I passed city blocks lined with people holding signs saying things that I couldn't repeat on television. And they had to establish
can't repeat
barricades
hearsay?
to protect me so I could drive into a protected entrance of the courthouse. Every single day, that's how I walked in the court.
There were more people waiting for.
Amber, I don't know if you realize this, but pretty sure those gates around the courthouse, the ones that you drove through, were not built specially for you. I don't know. Maybe we can get confirmation from folks that operate out of the Fairfax County Courthouse, but I'm pretty sure that those barricades were not created just for you. They weren't even created just for this courthouse or for this case. I don't think they were even created for this case. I think that they have been there for a long time. But even if they were created for this case, they're not just for you. I don't know if you realize that, but there is a lot of people out there that would love to get to Johnny Depp, whether it's for good or bad reasons. Who knows? I think there are a lot of people there that probably wanted to see him for good reasons. However, that was intended to keep all of the parties, both of the parties, I should say, separate from the crowds. So the signs that they showed, again, the signs that they showed for this portion here, talking about the signs that are anti-Amber, talking about, I heard you were a liar. Okay, that's not particularly vile. That's negative towards her. However, it's not something like she referenced in a previous portion signs that said something about burn the witch or something like that. None of the footage that has been shown so far has shown anything like that. The worst thing that they have shown is what they just showed here, which is, I heard you were a liar or something. And then hearsay, which isn't even necessarily about her. It's more about Johnny Depp's experience with the hearsay objection during his direct examination. Well, direct and cross and redirect, I should say. So the two signs that they just showed did not exactly support the level of drama, I could say, that she's indicating here. Anyhow, let's move on.
I didn't want this to be a thing. I didn't want it to be a trial. I didn't want it to be a part of the public record. But when someone sues you, you don't really have a choice.
That's true. That is, I will say that that is true, that when you are a defendant, you don't exactly have a choice in being pulled into court. However, she did have a choice in writing the op-ed. She did have a choice in writing the op-ed, and that was the choice that she made. And even though she arguably did have legal counsel look at it and give her counseling on it, there are various different jurisdictions that are going to look slightly differently at defamation. It's a state by state cause of action. So I would be curious to know whether the attorneys, I can't remember. I think the attorney that she had, the main attorney that she had look at it for her was a California attorney, in which case it's a different analysis than it is in California. Slightly different analysis, because there are certain anti-SLAPP laws that we've talked about before that can be different from one state to another. California has much stronger anti-SLAPP laws, which means that defamation can be much more difficult to litigate as a plaintiff. That's maybe one of the reasons why they decided to file in Virginia. Arguably, one of the reasons why strategically it was a good idea to file in Virginia as opposed to Los Angeles or California, I should say. Anyway, let's move on.
The Depp team argued that you were the abuser, that you instigated physical violence. Did you?
I never had to instigate it. I responded to it. When you're living in violence and it becomes normal, as I testified to, you have to adapt. You adopt strategies to cope with it. If it meant, as I testified to, if it meant the difference between a broken nose or a sore cheek, I would do it.
What about the witnesses who said they...
Wait, what? If it meant the difference between a broken nose and a sore cheek, I would do it. What does that even mean? I don't understand what that even means. She also says, I didn't have to instigate it because she was always responding to it. Okay, I mean, I guess she's going to continue on with her universe of facts. This is not at all what was shown to the jury. I mean, yes, through her testimony, but again, when your testimony does not line up with the testimony of anyone else, it's not supported by the testimony of anyone else, it's really, really difficult to find in someone's favor, especially when you have the other side lines up not just with the other witnesses that are arguably on his payroll, could be biased in that respect, but also the individuals that aren't. Alejandro Romero is an example. The police officers are another example. These are all individuals where that testimony lined up, and they were able to deduce, based off of all of that information, they being the jury, that he was not the aggressor. I mean, okay, I guess I would expect her to continue on with what she said in court, that she would stay at least consistent with that. It's just disappointing is what it is.
The witnesses who said they have seen you instigate physical violence, did they all come in and lie in court?
I'm, less interested in sitting here, relitigating it with you. I am not here to call any of these witnesses any names. I'm not here to do that.
But you're saying,
here to just kind of talk about it from what it felt like for me as the person who sat there.
Except that is what you're doing here. Like what she's doing here is saying none of those other individuals that Savannah Guthrie just pointed out, none of those other individuals got it right, because that's what you have to conclude if you are going to agree with Amber. Is it's just simple logic, right? It's just simple logic that you're going to say, well, if what you're saying is true, that say that they have seen otherwise, or or say that they have seen, what has happened or what has been present as conditions after these incidents, and they don't see the injuries that she says that she had. And at the same time, you have other individuals that say, well, I actually saw her use a closed fist against Johnny Depp. There's only one way to conclude that. Either she is lying or everyone else is lying. And she wants to try to say now, it's a very uncomfortable answer that she just gave, that she's like, well, I'm not interested in relitigating. It's kind of what you're doing by sitting down for an interview, is you are saying that you're going out and saying that the jury said that the jury came to the wrong conclusion. So you are relitigating it. You are arguing about what happened and what the proper conclusion is from your perspective. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating because at the end of the day, what she is saying is that they are lying. It's the only conclusion that you can come to if you are going to agree with her. Let's continue on. We'll fast forward through the next narration point.
There are tapes in which you acknowledge hitting. There are tapes in which you say, I started the fight.
I know much has been made of these audio tapes. And
Right.
as I testified on the stand, what you would hear in those clips are not evidence of what was happening. It was evidence of a negotiation of how to talk about that with your abuser.
But I am.
What do you even mean by that? It's not evidence of what was happening. It was evidence of a negotiation with an abuser. Okay, you could say that it was a negotiation with an abuser, but an objective person will look at that or listen to that and say, yeah, it's a negotiation with an abuser. Johnny Depp was the one that was negotiating with the abuser. That is totally the conclusion, a very reasonable conclusion to come away from that. And it's interesting that she's like that she tries to skirt away from this idea that she's 100% admitting to hitting him in so many different ways, in so many different instances. Don't smack Johnny Depp saying, don't smack my ears because it resounds in my cranium. And her response is, I love you. I'm sorry. I love you. So there's no instance of her saying, no, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's not even, it seems like her response in that last recording even was a little bit coy. Like, I love you, like being almost like playful and like trying to sort of like get away with it by being a little bit playful. It's gross. It's gross is what it is. Anyway, it looks like Savannah is about to push a little bit more on some of these recordings. So let's see what other questions she's going to ask.
But I am looking at a transcript that says, he says, you start physical fights, and you say, I did start a physical fight.
I did start a physical fight.
Right.
But you're telling me today, I never started a physical fight. And here you are on tape saying you did.
As I testified on the stand about this, is that when your life is at risk, not only will you take the blame for things that you shouldn't take the blame for, but when you're in an abusive dynamic, psychologically, emotionally, and physically, you don't have the luxury of saying, hey, this is black and white, because it's anything but when you're living in it.
He says he never hit you.
Okay, hang on. So she admitted in the recordings. It's just, the thing is, Johnny Depp often took the blame for things that he arguably shouldn't have taken the blame for, right? Like you can say this, that someone who is supportive of Johnny Depp could say that Johnny Depp took the blame for certain things that he arguably should not have. Same thing, Amber Heard supporters will say that Amber Heard took the blame for certain things that she shouldn't have. I think that there's a difference in the kinds of things that someone will take blame for. Maybe not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe not. But the thing is that like when you actually say on a recording, I did hit you. I did punch you. It is really, really, really hard to overlook that. And the thing is, when you have a recording from in the moment, the jury is not just going to be looking for the words that were said in terms of whether figuring out whether this is somebody who's just placating the other person or whether they are actually admitting to something. They're not just listening for the words that are being said. They're listening for the tone. They're listening for the context. They're listening for what the other person is saying, what the other person is doing. And the fact of the matter is that in these recordings, when Amber Heard is saying, like, yes, I did hit you. Yes, I did punch you. She's being a bit more animated. She's being more aggressive, whereas he's the one that's taking more of a back seat. So if you're going to try to argue that one person is placating the other, it's you're going to be looking at who is taking control in that conversation, because whoever's taking more control in that conversation is probably not the one that's placating, because the other one is probably the one that is thinking in their head, I just want this to be over. I just want this to be over. So that's one of those things that the jury may have actually considered when they were figuring out who was placating and who was admitting. Her recordings just sound like she's just admitting to certain things. She's admitting to them. That's what it is. That's what it is. And she's trying to make it seem like she's just placating. But these other factors, these other contextual cues just don't add up to her characterization that she's just placating. It's just nonsense. Let's continue on.
Never. Is that a lie?
Yes, it is.
He says he's never struck any woman. His lawyers argued at trial. None of his other prior relationships, not one woman has come forward and said he physically hit them. You were the only one.
Look what happened to me when I came forward.
You got
Would you?
Aquaman. Look what happened to you. You became a Me Too voice. You got Aquaman. Aquaman was a movie from, that came out in what, 2018? I mean, arguably she had that position before this point, but like, you remained an Aquaman moving forward. I don't know. I mean, look what happened. Okay, social media people, came after you, arguably because they thought you were lying. This is what's going to happen on social media. When people think that you are being inauthentic, when people think that you are doing something that they don't like, they are going to come after you. I'm sorry. That's just what happens. And on top of that, like, it seems like the other implication that she's making of like, look what happened to me, is like she got sued for defamation. That's going to happen if you lie. It's going to happen if you lie. And yes, of course, there is the possibility that someone will bring a defamation claim that is a bad actor. That is a possibility. But those claims, generally speaking, if there's no evidence to back them up, or there's not enough evidence to back them up, those cases are going to go away. It's a different situation than this particular case where there was evidence. There was a lot of evidence and it wasn't in her favor.
There was another trial, dealt with the same substantive issues, handled differently by a judge instead of a jury.
She says we prevailed. Amber was not a party to that litigation. We talked about this in the last video reaction. We talked about it in the last one. She was not a party. It was a different case, different laws, different country, different matter. Okay, and I will say, I will correct myself. The last time I said that she had not even been cross-examined in that case. Turns out she was. I was wrong about that. And I apologize for that. But the fact of the matter still remains that there were so many differences between that case and the Virginia case. There was a lot of evidence that was not available to come into the UK case that was able to come into the Virginia case. One subset of that was expert testimony. The fact that there were no experts that could testify in the UK case just blows my mind completely. especially after having watched the way that this whole trial played out in Virginia, the inability of psychologists or psychiatrists to testify, the inability of doctors or physicians to testify to the physical injuries, to the mental health issues that were involved in this case, for people from Hollywood to be able to explain how the damages would work, or to explain how how the reputational harm would be at play. The fact that there were no experts that could testify in the UK trial again blows my mind. So there were so many differences between the Virginia case and the UK case that, to say that the UK case was far better in a way, much better than the standards in the Virginia case, are laughable at best, in my opinion. Now, of course, we didn't have the benefit of cameras in the courtroom, so we couldn't see for ourselves everything that happened in the UK. But we could see for ourselves everything that happened in Virginia, and everything was above board. Everything was above board. If anything, Judge Azcarate gave so many extra chances to Amber Heard's team for a lot of the stuff that they were blundering throughout the trial. Also, they both had the same amount of time to put on their cases, and Amber Heard's team went right down to within minutes of their case being uh, uh, running out of their time. I can't even talk. I'm sorry. I'm so upset right now. But the fact that like they ended up with just minutes left for all of their testimony at the end of this trial, whereas on the other hand, Johnny Depp's side had hours left. Camille could have kept Amber Heard on the stand during her rebuttal testimony for arguably hours longer, and they would have been fine with their time for testimony. They would have. They had so much time. And it's because they didn't need to put on as much or as much testimony, as many witnesses as they needed to on Amber Heard's side, evidently. I don't know. I don't know how the time management on Amber Heard's side even was strategized or organized, but it seemed like they weren't using time as effectively, and yet they both had the same amount of time. Okay, but so that's just another example that like they didn't even use all of the time. Johnny Depp's side didn't even use all of the time that they had allocated to them, and yet they still came up ahead. So like to say that there were so many disadvantages to Amber Heard's team in the Virginia trial is just absolute nonsense. But also, once again, returning to this idea that Amber, somehow we prevailed. You were not a party to that case. You were a witness. You were a witness in that case. And so to say we prevailed, if we means everyone that is against Johnny Depp, okay, sure. But the publisher for The Sun prevailed in that case. We all have our opinions of that case. But let's be real. Amber Heard did not win in the UK trial because she was not a party. Pet peeve, bit of a pet peeve. Let's continue.
After 3.5 weeks, I took the stand and saw the courtroom packed full of Captain Jack Sparrow fans who were vocal, energized, who had come from all ends of the world.
Hang on. So the courtroom, yes, arguably was packed with people that were probably more likely sympathetic towards Johnny Depp than they were sympathetic towards Amber Heard. That is a reality. However, there were some very strict rules about courtroom etiquette. People could not be vocal in the courtroom. She makes it seem like people came in and were dressed up as Captain Jack Sparrow and were like waving around signs saying, "We love you, Johnny." That was outside the courthouse. Yes, of course. Outside the courthouse, arguably, there were a lot of people that were very excited. There were alpacas. There was all kinds of stuff outside the courtroom. However, inside that courtroom, they had bailiffs that would kick people out at the drop of a bat. at the drop of a hat, because if anyone was doing anything that was not above board, that could potentially be disruptive to the court proceeding, that could be potentially influencing the jury, they would kick them out. They would. So this idea that they were in the courtroom being very vocal is very misrepresentative of the reality of how this trial actually played out.
And the jury saw all of that.
Okay. Now, another part about this, and the jury saw all of that. So now she's blaming Johnny Depp supporters. Sure. Okay. I guess we could expect that. I guess we could expect that she would blame the people that are supportive of Johnny Depp. If she saw crowds of people being supportive of Johnny Depp, or if she says that they saw crowds of supporters for Johnny Depp, number one, probably true, actually, because of the fact that we know that the jury was allowed to be kind of like just let out into the public. And so they were able to like walk through. From what I understand from people that were actually at the courthouse, from my understanding is that they probably actually did see the whole big hullabaloo of all of the people that were there with signs and alpacas and people that were dressed up and all that kind of stuff. However, she is basically indicating that it is her opinion that the jury is not capable of seeing all of that and saying, okay, but those are just people that like Johnny Depp. They may or may not be watching what's going on in the courtroom. And this is my job, is to determine what's going on in the courtroom and to evaluate all of the evidence and all of the testimony that is coming out here. She is blaming Johnny Depp supporters, and she is at the same time denigrating the jury by saying that that they are either not intelligent enough, not capable enough. Like there could be a concern by someone that that maybe they would be influenced by people coming up to them and trying to influence them personally. But my understanding from what I have heard, there could be something that is, something happened that wasn't seen by someone that I had talked to, right? Just be there could be a gap of information, basically, is what I'm saying. But from what I understand, the people that I have spoken with that were outside the courthouse, that were inside the courthouse, that were actually physically there, if people saw who the jury was, who the jurors were, they left them alone because people understood that that would be improper to try to talk to them, to try to influence them, to try to intimidate them. So unless there was actual evidence that anything like that actually happened, to try to subtly imply that that actually did happen is so incredibly wrong. It's so wrong. Anyway, let's move on to the next segment.
And I was walking out of the bedroom, slapped me across the face. I turned to look at him and I said, Johnny, you hit me. You just hit me. I testified on the stand. I got hit for a very long time before I knew how to even try to defend myself. I felt so embarrassed that he could kick me to the ground in front of people. And he's punching me with a closed fist, punching me.
Right now, as you sit here today, do you stand by your testimony and your accusations against Johnny Depp about abuse?
Of course, and I will to my dying day. I know what happened to me.
Oh boy.
I'm here
Uh-oh.
as a survivor.
Uh-oh.
To my dying day,
Uh-oh.
will stand by every word of my testimony.
Oh no.
To support her allegations.
No. Oh no, 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 no. That sounds very much like a republication of her statements. By saying he is an abuser and he abused me and I'm a DV survivor. Oh, shnikes. If I'm her lawyer, I'm freaking out because that sounds like very much a republication of the statements in the op-ed to me personally. I said before from previous reaction videos from the parts that dropped earlier this week, in the past week, that she was getting dangerously close to sounding like she was maybe getting into the danger zone of qualifying for an injunction. And at this point, that definitely sounds like she is saying some more defamatory statements. Yeah, if I'm Johnny Depp's lawyer, I'm already writing the motion to request an injunction to prevent her from repeating the defamatory statements. Basically saying she's not allowed to ever say or imply again that he is an abuser. Because that's what the jury found. Jury found very clearly, and with punitive damages even, that Johnny Depp did not abuse Amber Heard, because her statements all implied that he was an abuser. And now she literally just said, I will stand by that to my dying day. She should not have sat for this interview. Okay. Oh God. Let's continue on.
In that courtroom, I am testifying about sexual assault and domestic violence next to a jury in front of a whole packed courtroom of people who are expressing their vocal support and disdain for me.
Wait. In front of people who are showing their vocal support for him? They weren't doing that in the courtroom, Amber. They weren't doing that in the courtroom. You were trying to say that everyone that came into the courtroom was being very vocally supportive of Johnny Depp in front of the jury. That is not what happened. I guarantee you, if people had done that, if the entire courtroom had done that, Judge Azcarate would have kicked everybody out. She would have done that. She was pretty serious about the rules. People did get kicked out of the courtroom for various reasons. She's trying to paint a picture. And the problem with it is that the people that weren't actually watching, the people that weren't actually paying attention throughout this trial, are the ones who are more likely to be deceived by her. And that's what sucks. That's what sucks about this kind of stuff. And that's why we do react videos like this. Man.
$7 million in total was donated to, and I split it between the ACLU and Children's Hospital of Los Angeles.
It was revealed at trial that you haven't done so yet. Do you think that raised questions as to your credibility with the jury?
Well, I think, look, when you say to someone, I bought a house, are you lying because you have not paid for it in full at that point?
What?
I made a pledge. And
what?
That pledge is made over time by its nature.
You're splitting hairs a little bit there, because when you say I donated, you know that everybody thinks that you've donated it.
Okay. Why is she again trying to compare this to buying a house? What you do when you buy a house is you take out a loan, and you have to pay off the loan in regular installments for a period of time. You bought the house. It doesn't mean that you own it outright. It's not the same thing as the distinction between pledging and donating. It's just not. It's just not. She's trying to make fetch happen, and it's just not happening. It's not going to. It's so frustrating when she tries to make these two things the same thing. She tried to do that on the stand too, and it didn't make sense then, and it doesn't make sense now. But I appreciate that Savannah is pushing back on her now. Let's hear what she's going to say next, because I appreciate the role that she's taking in this.
Not that you pledged it. So for the jurors sitting there,
actually, let's go back. Let's go back a second.
When you say I donated, you know that everybody thinks that you've donated it, not that you've pledged it. So for the jurors sitting there, do you think they felt like that was you getting caught in a lie.
Yes.
I don't know, because so much of I feel like so much of the trial was meant to cast aspersions on who I am as a human, my
Oh my
credibility, to call me a liar in every way you can, and
That
more.
was the trial. It was a credibility contest.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, yes, yes. Credibility of a witness of a party is always going to be at issue. So like this idea that she's like, oh well, this trial was trying to cast aspersions. The trial was trying to cast aspersions on Johnny Depp too. The question is, which one is going to stick? Which one is the jury going to believe? Both sides are going to have their credibility thrown through a window, and you're going to see which one is actually going to make it through the window or which one's going to get stuck on glass. I don't know. Maybe that's not a good metaphor, but like this idea that she's like complaining, like, oh, they gave me a hard time. No, that's what a trial is. That's what's supposed to happen, because that is how you get to the truth. You get to the truth through an adversarial process. That's what trial is you have both sides making the best case possible and trying to poke holes in the other side's narrative, in the other side's evidence, in the other side's testimony. Both sides have an equal opportunity to do that. So I'm sorry if the jury ended up not coming to the conclusion that you were correct and that the other side instead was correct, but like that's just the process. That's the adversarial process. That's the adversarial process. Okay, next part.
And they suggested this was a publicity stunt, a way to raise your profile at a time when these issues were quite relevant.
It was one of those few moments of levity in the trial when I heard it suggested that my op-ed
Levity?
in the Washington Post could potentially
Did anyone
boost
laugh?
sales for an international multi-million-dollar superhero franchise movie that I was starring in. It's the other way around. You know, if anything, we're trying to get more awareness and attention on the issues within the article.
It wasn't a publicity stunt or a way to.
It's the opposite, you know.
Wait. So you're saying that you had the op-ed coincide with Aquaman so that you could get attention for the op-ed from Aquaman for the issues, for me too. But in order to get to Amber's conclusion, you still have to go from people were paying attention to Aquaman. And because of that, she decided to have her article coincide with Aquaman so that she could get attention for her conclusion is the attention for Me Too. That's complete BS though, as we all know, because we were there in 2018, right? We all remember how Me Too was taking over everything. Everything, not just in Hollywood, but in so many other places, in so many other industries. It was something that filtered through our entire society. So again, she's in another universe, it seems like. Okay, Amber.
What I learned in that trial is it's never going to be good enough. If you have proof, then it was a scheme. It was a hoax.
She's suggesting that the photos that Johnny Depp's team presented to show that she didn't have the injuries in the days that followed. They gave dates for those. They gave dates for those events. They gave dates for the alleged incident. The jury's able to take what time they think is involved and they can calculate that. They can calculate what a bruise probably should look like from those dates. And if they see that there's absolutely nothing on her back as she's wearing a backless dress, they are free to make those conclusions. And so now she's saying that it's not enough that you have evidence because then it's a hoax. If you have what you say is evidence of one claim or yeah, of a particular claim, but then there's also evidence showing the opposite. Yeah, your evidence might not be enough because it is being shown to be false based off of other evidence that you can find from elsewhere. I'm sorry, like this is also what happens. Again, this is what the adversarial process is all about. You have one side presenting one set of facts, you have another side presenting another set of facts, and the jury is supposed to take all of those and make sense of it and decide which one's up, which one's down. That's what happened. She had insufficient evidence for her claims.
If you don't have proof, it didn't happen. If you have a bruise, it's fake. If you don't have a bruise, then violence clearly didn't hurt you.
If you have a bruise, okay, if you are showing photos of a bruise that looks like it's not real, then yes, of course, the conclusion that it's fake is totally possible and totally reasonable. That's what happened here.
If you told people, then you're hysterical. If you didn't tell anyone, it didn't happen.
What? If you told people, then you're hysterical. I don't understand. That didn't even come up in this trial, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. Maybe someone can comment otherwise and let me know. My understanding is that, or my understanding, my memory says that there was nothing about her not telling people or her telling people. Maybe she's suggesting the fact that she couldn't get evidence in of her telling her friends about these things because of the fact that that's hearsay. That's it's proper to leave out evidence like that because there are rules against hearsay. Okay. Let's move on to this interview.
There's no experience like being cross-examined. What was that experience like for you?
One of the scariest, most intimidating thing for anybody talking about sexual violence is not being believed, being called a liar, or being humiliated.
A lot of people have pointed out that it sounds strange that she would say something that like the most harrowing experience that she had gone through was this trial when she's alleging that she also went through SA. I can go a certain empathetic step and say that, you know, maybe there's a certain amplification of what had happened in having to go through reliving those memories, assuming that those memories are real, of course. But it is interesting that she says that this was like the scariest thing that she had ever gone through. When arguably one could say that the scariest thing that she had ever been through, assuming it was real, was the SA incident. One would think. But again, I have personally never been through an experience like that. So I wouldn't want to presume to know what DV survivors' certain levels of fear would be in relation to having to testify to the things that had happened versus actually going through the thing itself. But this is me as an outsider looking at that saying, I'm a little bit skeptical of that. If you say that you went through SA, I'm a little bit skeptical that this is the worst experience that you've ever been through, or the scariest experience that you had ever been through. However, at the same time, cross-examination arguably is a very intimidating and scary experience. I will say that. It's not a cakewalk. It's not a walk in the park. However whatever metaphor you want to use for it, right? It's not easy. But the language that she uses for it is very interesting. Let's just say that.
Is there one piece of evidence that you wish the jury had seen that you could point to? You say, oh, this would have made the difference.
Yeah,
What is it?
there's a binder worth of years of notes dating back to 2011 from the very beginning of my relationship that were taken by my doctor, who I was reporting the abuse to.
So she referenced these therapist notes when she was on the stand because she referenced them to say that she had previously testified, I think in the UK. I think she said that she had previously testified in the UK that the abuse had started in 2013 or 2014. I can't remember, at a later date. And that she said that since the UK trial, she had come across these notes. I hope I'm getting that right. It was something along the lines of she had come across those notes after the UK trial. And so she now remembered that the abuse started back in 2012 at the very beginning of their relationship. It sounds like a very convenient excuse when you put it that way. But basically she was kind of explaining away why she suddenly had a different year for when the abuse started. Interesting. Number one, the notes, I understand, are self-serving notes. These are notes that are, first off, hearsay papers. So in order for these documents to come in, there has to be an exception to the hearsay rule. Medical documents can do it, assuming that they have been taken in a particular way, a way that is in conformity with the way that the medical notes typically will be taken. So the fact that these were kept out says a few things. It shows that they are hearsay, first off. They're not going to be kept out by the court because they're substantive. They're going to be kept out because the court has determined that they are unreliable. And if there's an allegation that Judge Azcarate kept these out improperly, interesting. Maybe this is going to be one of the bases for an appeal. Interesting. We'll see how that goes. As I've said before, evidentiary decisions are up to the discretion of the court. And so in order for Amber Heard to win on an appeal of that particular decision by the judge, the appellate court would have to say that Judge Azcarate abused her discretion in determining that. Basically, they would have to say that there was that these papers obviously should have been admitted, and they were not. The likelihood of that happening is pretty damn low. But it's convenient for her to try to throw the judge under the bus in this respect. Interesting. Okay. We'll see how that works. But the other part about that is that she says that she had seen those notes after the UK court, which means that the UK court also didn't have these admitted. So she can't say that this is evidence that was admitted in the UK court that was not admitted in Virginia. Interesting. And let's see if she maybe tries to imply otherwise.
I am talking about what's happening to me in real time. She was taking contemporaneous notes of what was happening.
Okay, so I understand now why those notes were probably left out, is because her therapist was probably okay. Now let me first get that thought. I'm having multiple thoughts at once. But the reason why she probably kept those out, why Judge Azcarate probably kept those out, is because they probably just literally said almost verbatim what Amber said happened. Which would just be a way of like backdooring in, bolstering testimony that is not actually going to be relevant to well, not relevant, it's relevant, but it would be an improper bolstering of her testimony to say like this is just more of Amber said, but doing it through a therapist, which would make it look to a jury like, oh, this is a therapist that is agreeing. And like and sometimes that can improperly add more weight to the accusation because it just it looks like it's not just Amber Heard said, but it's Amber Heard said and a therapist is agreeing, if that makes any sense. So like if all it's doing is just republishing her allegations, it's not helpful to a jury. So I can see how this probably was kept out, but at the same time, I'm also wondering why we didn't hear testimony from this therapist. I mean, I don't know. Is this I would think that they would have named the therapist if this was one of the witnesses that testified. But it sounds like it wasn't. So what why didn't Amber's attorneys call this witness this psychologist as a witness? Why didn't they? Why? I really want to know. Because if she's going to claim that this therapist had all of this knowledge of this stuff happening, I would love to hear from that therapist to ask, did you know about these allegations? Did you know about these accusations? And what were your thoughts of that? What were your obligations and your responsibilities? Why wasn't the psychologist brought in? Maybe the psychologist was, maybe it was one of the other witnesses, but I don't think so. The couples therapist is the only one that I can think of that actually saw Amber during the relationship, and that was the couples therapist, and they only saw her for a limited amount of time. That was Dr. Anderson. So yeah, so that brings me back to why didn't that witness testify? Or why didn't that psychologist or psychiatrist testify as a witness? I have questions. I have a lot of questions about this.
I testified I was attacked on that flight and I
Oh,
was attacked in front of people.
that's easy
And
hearsay.
when I got off the plane, sent messages to people
But that's
about what had happened. I was angry because this happened. Can you believe he did this and this and this, And one of the people I reached out to was my father.
hang on. That's easy hearsay. You don't have an exception to hearsay. And so that people are not confused, there were text messages that were brought in that were things that Amber said, things that Johnny said. And the reason why those came in was because those were statements against their interests. That is an exception to hearsay, or sometimes, depending on the jurisdiction, sometimes it's technically not hearsay. When you have a party who says something, they have something through a text message or through a recording or something that is against their own interests, the other side can bring that in. That's not hearsay. Or it's an exception to hearsay. But you can't just bring in anything that you said at some point because you said it. All that does is it bolsters what you said as if it's supposed to somehow support your testimony. But it's just you repeating your allegation. It's not proper evidence. So, okay, cool. Smoking gun. All right. It's not. It's really not. It's not damning evidence. And it's not particularly supportive. She thinks it is because she's like, oh, look, this is me telling other people about it. So how does that show to a jury that it was more likely that what you say happened? It doesn't. All it says is you told other people about that allegation. Okay. Let's move on.
There's a text message where Johnny promises total global humiliation for you. Do you feel like that came true?
I know he promised it. I testified to this. I'm not a good victim. I get it. I'm not a likable victim.
You're not a
I'm not a
victim.
perfect victim. I get it. I'm not a saint. I'm not asking anyone to like me. But when I testified, I asked the jury to just see me as human and to hear his own words, which is a promise to do this, a promise
Okay.
to humiliate me, a promise
We
to
heard
ruin
this
me
part earlier.
that feels as though he has.
Again, we heard this part earlier, but her I swear, her dramatics, her ellipses between words, it doesn't feel natural. It just doesn't. It feels like she is trying to layer on the drama. And I just want her to be real with us for a change. I really do. I really do. It's very frustrating. But like this idea, I get it. Who wouldn't want the jury to see you as human, to see you as real? Of course. Of course she did. I believe that. The problem is she didn't present a version of herself to the extent that the jury could do that. She just didn't. Let's move on.
And on my side of the bed was human fecal matter.
I saw what was happening to me in real time. I don't care what one thinks about me or what judgments you want to make
I
about
think she
what
does.
happened in the privacy of my own home and my marriage behind
No.
closed doors. I don't presume the average person should know those things, and so I don't take it personally. But even somebody who is sure I'm deserving
Okay, we know
of
this part.
all this hate and
Okay.
vitriol, even if you think that I'm lying, you still couldn't tell me, look me in the eye and tell me that you think on social media there's been a fair representation. You cannot tell me that you think that this has been fair.
Amber, I'm sorry. People saw photos. The jury may not have seen a photo of the grumpy that was left on the bed, but the rest of the world could see it. And it's clear if you've seen the photos, it's clear that those don't come from a Yorkie. I'm sorry. It's just people are allowed to make their conclusions. They absolutely are. They're allowed to do it. And if you see a photo that doesn't match up with your understanding, with your version of the events, people are well within their right to say that is messed up. It's messed up what you did. I'm sorry. Like, okay, sure, people can have a hard time with the reenactments of the various portions of her testimony. Okay, sure. I didn't personally partake in any of that because that's not my personal interest in this entire trial. We were focused on this channel on going through the actual allegations and whatnot and presenting a legal perspective so that people can understand what's really going on during this trial, and they can make sense of it as they continue to watch as well. So, but these other trends, people are going to react. People are going to react to things that they find authentic versus inauthentic. And those are all organic. And I think that's the problem that she has with it, is that she can't claim that those are bots, right? You can't claim that these videos of people on TikTok are somehow bots. So she's bothered by the fact, and she says that she's not bothered by it, but she's obviously bothered by it because she's talking about it. She's bringing it up. But like, I think that the thing that bothers her about it is the fact that this is an organic reaction by people. People are allowed to have their conclusions. They're allowed to reach their conclusions based off of what they see. And they're allowed to make a determination as to whether something is right or wrong, organic or inorganic, or or authentic or inauthentic. I'm sorry. And if you think that that is vile human behavior, that's your opinion. But people are going to do it. The internet is the internet. I'm sorry. What can you say about it? And the thing is, when people have reached a conclusion that you have left something on a bed that is absolutely vile, they are well within their right to respond to that, to give their opinion of that. They are. And I'm sorry if you think that's not fair. But is it not fair? Is fair even a proper question? A proper calculus for that situation? People have a right to make their conclusions. I'm sorry. Let's move on.
I think a majority of this trial was played out outside of a courtroom, unfortunately. I think vast majority of this trial was played out on social media. And I think that this trial is an example of that gone haywire, gone amok. And the jury is not immune to that.
You think the jury saw it?
How could they not? I think even the most well-intentioned juror, it would have been impossible to avoid this.
Whoa. We reacted to this in the last segment, of course, but again, it bears repeating because it's coming up again. It bears repeating. A, we don't know if the jury even saw anything on social media. B, we don't know, even if they saw something on social media, if they were influenced by it. Both of those are questions that would have to be answered if in order to come to the conclusion that the jury was improperly impacted by social media during this trial. You have to ask those two questions. You can't just assume that. And by her going around and assuming that, she is just casting aspersions on the jury. She's denigrating the jury, and she's denigrating the entire jury process. I, for one, believe that the jury is going to take their role particularly seriously. Generally speaking, they will. And in a case like this, where they know that the stakes are very high and they have probably some understanding, probably, of the fact that there's going to be questions about the jury because there's a lot of interest in this particular case, they probably are going to take that very seriously. Call me naive, but I really think that they are going to be taking their role very seriously in a case like this. And by that, I mean, they will do their best to avoid social media. And even if they do come across something on social media or the media or elsewhere, they will try to disregard it as much as possible. So to say that the vast majority of this case was played out on social media is, first off, not based in fact, because we don't have any facts that the jury was actually impacted by them. And at the end of the day, the decision was made by the jury. The decision was not made by social media. And again, she is mistaking the court of public opinion with the court of law. Those two are completely separate things. And it seems like she was making her decisions throughout this trial. We talked a lot about courtroom fashion, and it felt like what she was doing was mistaking the court of law with the court of public opinion. What she was trying to do was she was turning herself to face the court of public opinion to come across as this Me Too warrior, very strong, severe woman who is not going to back down to the patriarchy and like that whole kind of line of messages, which has its place in society. She could have portrayed herself that way outside the courtroom before and after this trial, and then come into the courtroom and had a totally different vibe because that's the purpose of that particular case. And it would have been fine. It would have been fine, but it just seemed like she wanted to bring in the court of public opinion into the courtroom to make to make herself into like this Me Too warrior on the stand. And that's what it seemed like was happening. And that's not beneficial to her case. So it's almost like I almost wonder if for her, no matter what, the trial was going to be, the outcome of the trial was going to be a result of the court of public opinion, regardless of what the jury said or whatever. Regardless of what the jury said, regardless of how things came out. It's almost like she expected the court of public opinion to agree with her, and she expected that to filter into the courtroom somehow. I don't know. I don't know exactly what she was thinking, but it didn't work. And it's not logical. It doesn't make sense. And it sounds like she probably had advice from some attorneys that she did not listen to. That's my impression based off of what I was able to piece together from observing this trial. Okay, rant over. Let's move on.
The Depp lawyer called your testimony the performance of a lifetime and said you were acting. What do you say to that?
Says the lawyer for the man who convinced the world he had scissors for fingers.
Yeah, we went over this one.
I'm the performer.
Yeah,
I
okay.
had listened to weeks of testimony insinuating that, or saying quite directly that, I'm a terrible actress. So I'm a bit confused how I could be both.
So, okay, yeah. Once again, we went over the scissor fingers. Scissor fingers. His name was not Edward Scissorfingers. His name was Edward Scissorhands. But okay. So this idea that he convinced the world, of course, as we know, Johnny Depp is not Edward Scissorhands. He does not, in fact, have scissors for hands. I know. Mind blowing, right? He really convinced us that that was actually the case. But then also at the same time saying, you can't say that it was a performance of a lifetime and that I'm a terrible actress. Yes, they can, because the implication is for you, it was a performance of a lifetime. However, you are a bad actress. So therefore, it was your performance of a lifetime, not a good performance. So if you're confused, Amber, that's the explanation. Let's continue.
It's the day of the verdict. You come into the courtroom. Were you feeling confident?
That's a great question.
I don't
wish
have an
could say
answer for
yes
it.
to that. I want to say yes to you, but it wouldn't be true.
Feels dramatic.
Question. The statement has a defamatory implication about Mr. Depp. And
Again, it was, yeah, we went over this. We went over this part from before, but again, it feels dramatic. Again, it feels like I don't see how viewing the evidence in the testimony as it played out and viewing the performance of her attorneys, not to denigrate her entire legal team, but you know what I mean. It just there were mistakes were made. There were certain incompetencies that we have talked about quite a bit on this channel. And I don't see how she could be confident going into it because of those reasons. Not because of like social media, Johnny Depp, blah, blah, blah. He's a celebrity. And he had 3.5 weeks before, I got on the stand. The fact that people could not believe her testimony because she came off as not credible. The fact that there was really no testimony that lined up with hers. Her sister's is kind of one exception, but even that one is a different account, a different factual account than Amber's, because both of them talked about like different positioning of different individuals between the three of them and a different sequence of events and different things that happened, to be honest. So, okay. All right. Anyway, let's move on.
There's no polite way to say it. The jury looked at the evidence you presented. They listened to your testimony and they did not believe you. They thought you were lying.
Yeah.
I'll put it this way. How could they make a judgment? How could they not come to that conclusion? They had sat in those seats and heard over 3 weeks of nonstop, relentless testimony from paid employees.
Oh boy.
And towards the end of the trial, randos, as I say.
Randos.
So you don't blame
Okay. Yep. This is a portion that was, of course, also before him. Most of this so far has been already shown from previous portions. Okay, so first off, how could they not? She's blaming the judicial process. Great. Blaming the paid witnesses, the ones that are on his payroll. And then blaming randos, she calls, that came in. Sorry, make sure it's not blocked. Randos that came in, according to her, to testify for Johnny Depp. Okay, randos, I guess, is what includes Alejandro Romero, who's not on Johnny's like list of people that are being paid by him. Also, Isaac Bruch is not on this payroll, however, was getting benefits from him. So I guess you could include him, with payroll people, even though he's not really being paid by them. Like he's being supported by them, by Johnny in a lot of ways. But then what about the police officers? What about the police officers, Amber? What about the police officers? They're not on the payroll and they're not randos. They were people that responded to a 911 call, that responded to 2 911 calls on the night of May 21st, 2016. And you were very nonchalant with them. There was body cam footage. There were audios. There was audio footage of you. Gosh. It's very frustrating. And then randos. So what? So what if these people were random people that were brought in as rebuttal witnesses? Are you including Kate Moss as a rando? Kate Moss, the person that you implied to the jury had been thrown down the stairs by Johnny Depp. I'm sorry. She came in, she testified. She said none of that had ever happened. But she's a rando, according to Amber Heard. Morgan Tremaine, the TMZ guy, he's a rando. So what? I don't know. I don't know what, how she, what that means for her, that they're randos, that these are individuals who are not classified as people that were paid by Johnny Depp. So therefore they're randos. How's that a pejorative to be a rando? I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this term, but it's just very strange that she's trying to denigrate these individuals who came in and testified against her narrative. Okay. I mean, I guess that's a reason to denigrate them because you don't like them. But again, I really feel like this interview from Amber Heard's perspective should not have happened. What else does Savannah Guthrie have to say? Coming from that very suspicious look. Let's continue.
the jury.
I don't blame them. It wasn't, I don't blame them. I actually understand he's a beloved character.
He's a beloved
and
character.
People feel they know him. He's a fantastic actor.
Their job is to not be dazzled by that.
And again, how could they, after listening to 3.5 weeks of testimony about how I was a non-credible person, not to believe a word that came out of my mouth? I'm a hysterical woman. I'm a crazy woman. I can't be trusted over and over again.
Okay. So yeah. So again, she's blaming the judicial process. And the reason for why I say that is because Johnny Depp, being the person who filed the lawsuit, he is the plaintiff. The plaintiff has the burden of proof, so he gets to go first. Yes, she is a counter plaintiff, but that was in response to his complaint. So therefore, he still goes first. But that's only half the trial. So she's claiming that this jury only listened to the first half of the trial, and that therefore, after that point, they just turned off their brains and said, nope, I'm not going to listen to anything else. There is no evidence that the jury did that. So she's either saying that, or that they were dazzled by his celebrity, dazzled by him being a beloved character. And again, it is offensive to the intelligence and the competence and the seriousness of the jury. It's ridiculous that she would again cast these aspersions about the jury. It's so annoying. It is so annoying, and to me, like, I just it it upsets me so much because this is the process that we have in the United States, and I think overall it's a good process. Does our judicial system need some tweaking here and there? Probably. Yeah, probably. There are all kinds of complaints that we can discuss about our judicial system, but like this idea that the jury was never going to be fair to her because of the fact that he's a beloved character and it's impossible for them to not be dazzled by him. Um Again, like I said in a previous reaction video, she should have said that from the beginning. She wasn't moving the goalposts here. She should have said that from the beginning to say, it's not going to be possible for this jury to come to a clean conclusion about the truth because of the fact that they will be dazzled by this beloved character, this actor who's very good at acting. She should have said that from the beginning. But because of the fact that that was not an argument that she made from the beginning, this smells like she's moving the goalposts. I talked about it more at length earlier, so that's all I'll say about that for now.
When I asked his lawyers, why do you think you won? The answer I got was because she never took responsibility for anything
Yeah.
she did
Yeah.
in the marriage. And as we're sitting here and I watched her cross-examination, there's an answer for everything. Do you feel you should have owned up to more of your
Ooh,
own
good question.
bad behavior that was revealed in court?
I'm glad actually you asked me that because, you know, there is an answer for these things. You say, they said this on the stand. You know, you hear my voice in those audio tapes. It's not the voice of me now. That's not who I am now.
Yeah, because you're
did
making a
do
different
and
version
say
of yourself.
horrible, regrettable things throughout my relationship.
It sounds like what she's trying to say is that the version of her that you hear in the recordings is not the version of her that is the real her. Listen to the version of me in court as opposed to the version of me in the audio recordings. But in reality, the audio recording versions are the ones that are going to be trusted more often than not. And there's good reason for that because she didn't have any reason to lie on those recordings, right? She wasn't sitting in front of a jury that she's trying to convince of her case, right? This is her being in her real environment, in her native environment. And so she's responding very authentically, one would assume, one would presume, in these moments where she's being recorded. Whereas in the courtroom, she knows she's being observed. She knows she's being analyzed. She knows that she has, in some respects, a job to sell her testimony. For every witness, that's basically what's going on is they have a job to sell their testimony. Regardless of how much they actively tried to sell that testimony, like that's another story. But regardless of that, there is an aspect of that they are selling their testimony. So, yeah, the version of her in the courtroom is not going to be trusted as much as the version of her in previous audio recordings. That's just how it works. That's just how any rational human brain works. Let's go back 10 seconds to make sure that I have full context for whatever next is going to come out of her mouth. Okay. Come on. Let's go.
Who I am now. I did do and say horrible, regrettable things throughout my relationship. I behaved in horrible, almost unrecognizable to myself ways. There's so much, I have so much regret.
On the first day of the trial, you issued a statement, and part of the statement said, I still have love for Johnny.
Yes.
Is that still true
Yes,
Okay.
after everything?
absolutely. Absolutely. I love him. I loved him with all my heart. And I tried the best I could to make a deeply broken relationship work. And I couldn't.
Okay. Doesn't feel authentic. That's just my personal assessment. That's not me as a lawyer. This is me as a person. It doesn't feel like the feeling reaches her eyes when she says that. I'm not entirely convinced that she loves him now. I don't know if maybe there was a day that she loved him in the past, but it doesn't look like the feeling is reaching her eyes. So there's that.
I hope this hasn't, had the chilling effect that I worry it may have on other people. I worry about that. But if I can look you in the eye, Savannah, and say, I'm still here, and maybe that serves to balance out some of the very, very real fear others may have about coming forward or speaking out.
How do you see your future now? Do you think you'll
Hang on. Before we get into the future, if you are a DV survivor, you are not Amber Heard. You are not Amber Heard, and if you are in a position that you feel the need to come forward and you are afraid to come forward, there are people that you can talk to. There are hotlines that you can find, that you can call people. There are people that you can talk to. This idea that that this trial has chilled DV survivors from coming out. I have seen people that have reached out to me that have said, I am about to testify against my abuser. And after watching this trial with LawTube, I feel so much more confident going into it because I understand the process. This is a very real impact that is positive for a DV survivor. There may be others that have not paid as much attention that may think that they are like Amber Heard. They are not. If you are a DV survivor, you are not the same as Amber Heard. If anything, it is my opinion that the people that have been paying attention to this trial have found themselves to understand the process so much more. And this has given a voice to male DV survivors who also fall into that category of not being believed and being very hesitant to come forward and talk about it. And it's largely because of the fact that, I mean, first off, DV survivors and the concerns and the fears that they already have with coming forward because of being controlled by their abuser, being in situations where they still have fear from their abuser, even when they are out of the relationship. I understand that. I get that. That all is those are all things that people struggle with across the board. Male DV survivors on top of that often have stigma about masculinity, stigma about being beaten by a woman. That is it compounds the possibility of, or it compounds the issues, I should say, with them stepping forward. This trial, I think, for a lot of people, has given them some comfort that they too can be believed. Men too can be believed. So Amber Heard does not represent DV survivors. She just doesn't. Remember that.
act again?
Oh, let's go back.
Because if
We'll
others may
go back to talk about
have
this
about
future
coming forward
question.
or speaking out.
How do you see your future now? Do you think you'll act again?
I get to be a mom. I get to be a mom, like, full time.
One day you may want to tell your daughter about this or have to tell your daughter about everything that you've gone through. What would you tell her about what happened here and what this experience has meant.
I think no matter what, it will mean something. I did the right thing. I did everything I could to stand up for myself and the truth.
Okay.
I look forward to living my life, and I have a long one, I hope, in front of me.
I hope so too.
And I will continue to walk through this with my chin up.
A lot of people have talked about how concerned they are about Amber Heard's child. I will say that I'm not going to join in on those concerns unless I see something or see evidence that would show that her child is somehow in some kind of danger. I haven't seen anything of that, because I'm not going to jump onto allegations without evidence. We always do fact-based analysis on this channel. It's going to be very interesting to see what ends up happening with her and her daughter moving forward. And I, for one, have said, and I maintain this at this point, she says she hopes she has a long life. I hope so too. I hope so too. I hope that she can take some time to have some quiet, deal with the stuff that she needs to deal with, have some contrition, and then make a comeback. I love a good comeback story. Maybe it's because I grew up watching too much Oprah, but I love a good comeback story, you guys. If there's a way that she could go through her own like soul's journey to figure out what the heck is wrong with Amber Heard, and make some kind of a comeback about, but like only after real contrition. Real contrition first. You go through the valley of shadows first, and then you can come up to make your way towards the peak again. That's my take. That's my take on that. And so that is the end of this broadcast. The Dateline special. So most of this interview was pieces that had already been dropped previously in the past week. So a lot of this was repeats, but I hope you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. And there was a little bit added here and there. But anyhow, that's my take on everything. I stand by my previous reactions, except for, of course, the factual error that about her not having been cross-examined. I have been corrected on that, and now I stand corrected. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this or at least found it informative. And if you did, I would love it if you could hit the like button. And otherwise, if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is uploaded. And otherwise, I will see you in the next video. See ya.